Case study: Binion vs. Evans 1972. Introduction. The 1972 case of Binion vs. Evans stands as a landmark judgment in English land law. It significantly broadened the scope of constructive trusts and their application to situations involving licenses to occupy land. This case study delves into the details of the dispute, the legal principles involved, and the lasting impact of the court's decision on land ownership and occupancy rights. Facts. A seemingly straightforward property purchase turned into a complex legal battle. Mr. and Mrs. Binion, the plaintiffs, purchased a property from Tredegar Estate. However, the sale agreement included a crucial caveat: subject to Mrs. Evans' right to reside in one of the cottages on the land. This seemingly simple clause ignited a legal dispute. Legal issue. The core legal question in Binion vs. Evans centered on the nature of Mrs. Evans' occupancy right. Did she have a legally enforceable right to continue living in the cottage? And if so, what type of legal right was it? Relevant law. To understand the court's decision, it's essential to grasp the key legal concepts. License. In land law, a license is a personal permission granted by a landowner to another person to enter or use their land for a specific purpose. It is not a proprietary right, meaning it doesn't give the licensee ownership rights. Crucially, a license can be revoked by the landowner at any time without reason. Constructive trust. A constructive trust is a legal remedy imposed by a court to prevent unjust enrichment. It arises when a party is seen to be unfairly holding onto a property or benefit that rightfully belongs to another. Unlike a formal trust, a constructive trust is not necessarily created through an intentional agreement but arises from the court's assessment of fairness in a particular situation. Reasoning and holding. The Binions argued that Mrs. Evans simply had a license to occupy the cottage. Since licenses are revocable at will, they believed they could evict her. Additionally, they contended that they purchased the property unaware of any specific agreement between Mrs. Evans and the previous owner and therefore were not bound by it. Mrs. Evans, on the other hand, presented a compelling counter-argument. She claimed that the promise made by the defendants, Mr. and Mrs. Evans, to allow her to live in the cottage for her life created a binding expectation of continued occupancy, even if not a formal lease. She relied on the concept of proprietary estoppel, which protects individuals who have relied on a promise or assurance from another party, even if not a formal legal agreement. The Court of Appeal sided with Mrs. Evans in a groundbreaking decision. They acknowledged that while Mrs. Evans did not possess a traditional legal right such as a lease, a constructive trust had arisen in her favor. Here is the reasoning behind the court's decision. Unconscionable result. The court recognized that evicting Mrs. Evans, especially considering the explicit promise made by the defendants and the fact that the Binions purchased the property with knowledge of her occupancy, would be unfair and unconscionable. Change of position. The court considered the concept of detriment. Mrs. Evans had likely relied on the promise to her detriment, potentially giving up other housing options or making other life decisions based on the expectation of residing in the cottage. Price reduction. The court further noted that the Binions likely paid a reduced price for the property due to Mrs. Evans' right to remain. In essence, they benefited from the promise made by the previous owners. Significance: constructive trusts in land law. The case established a crucial precedent for applying constructive trusts in land law disputes concerning occupancy rights. It showed that even if someone doesn't have a formal legal right to occupy land, a court can impose a constructive trust if evicting them would be unfair, especially if they relied on a promise and the new owner benefited from the situation. Discounted purchase price. Protection beyond legal rights. Binion v. Evans broadened the scope of protection for individuals in occupancy situations beyond traditional legal rights like leases. It emphasized the role of fairness, preventing unjust enrichment, and recognizing detrimental reliance on promises made in good faith. Conclusion: the Binion vs. Evans case serves as a crucial reminder that fairness and good faith play a significant role in land law, even beyond the strict boundaries of formal legal agreements. It established a crucial tool: constructive trusts for courts to ensure just outcomes in situations where traditional legal rights might not offer adequate protection. If you are a law student and looking for more case studies, visit our website www.mylawtutor.net.